What happens when billions of people voluntarily enter the largest behavioral experiment in human history, without ever signing a consent form? Every day, we wake up, reach for our phones, and unwittingly participate in an unprecedented social experiment that's reshaping our behaviors, relationships, and perhaps even society itself. I'm your host, and in this series, we're diving deep into how our digital platforms have evolved into something eerily reminiscent of one of psychology's most notorious experiments. Last week, I walked into my favorite cafe and froze at the entrance. Every single person, from teenagers to retirees, was hunched over their phones, scrolling, tapping, completely disconnected from each other yet digitally connected to thousands. This alone together phenomenon isn't just a modern paradox. It might be a warning sign. We think we're using social media, but increasingly, it's using us as test subjects in a global laboratory where the scientists are algorithms, and the experiment has no defined endpoint. To understand where we might be headed, we need to look back at a fascinating and disturbing experiment conducted in the 1960s. Ethologist John B. Calhoun created what he called Universe 25, a mouse utopia with unlimited food, water, and space. His question was simple: what happens to a society when all material needs are met? The initial results were predictable. The mice reproduced rapidly, population boomed, and the colony thrived. But what happened next stunned researchers and continues to haunt sociologists to this day. Despite having everything they physically needed, the mouse society began to unravel. Aggressive behavior skyrocketed. Social structures collapsed. Some mice became hyper-aggressive warlords, while others, dubbed the beautiful ones, withdrew from social interaction entirely, focusing only on grooming themselves and avoiding conflict. Reproduction rates plummeted. Maternal care declined dramatically, with mothers abandoning their young. And perhaps most disconcertingly, this all happened while resources remained abundant. Calhoun called this phenomenon a behavioral sink, a spiral of maladaptive behaviors leading to population collapse despite ideal physical conditions. The implications were profound. Paradise, it seemed, had a dark side. The mice had food in their bellies but emptiness in their social lives. They had space but no meaningful roles or purpose. As Calhoun himself noted, they had everything they needed physically, yet they created their own dystopia. It's a chilling reminder that biological needs, satisfied, don't automatically translate to psychological well-being or social harmony. Fast forward to today. Our digital landscape has inadvertently created conditions remarkably similar to Universe 25, an environment of unprecedented abundance. Think about it: unlimited content available 24/7, infinite social connections possible at the tap of a screen, constant stimulation, entertainment on demand. We've never had more information, more content, more ways to connect. Yet simultaneously, rates of loneliness, anxiety, and social disconnection have reached alarming levels. The parallels are difficult to ignore. Different platforms create unique experimental environments. TikTok functions essentially as an attention laboratory, with algorithms that adapt to preferences with frightening speed, creating compulsive usage patterns through dopamine loops. X, formerly Twitter, acts as what researchers have termed an outrage machine, amplifying divisive content and rewarding emotional reactions over measured discourse. YouTube's recommendation system has been studied for its potential role in both maintaining mainstream viewpoints and, under certain conditions, guiding users toward increasingly extreme content. Tech founders claim they're connecting the world, but they've actually constructed elaborate mazes we all run through while they collect data on which turns we take. Each platform has its own experimental parameters: infinite scroll removing natural stopping points, notification systems triggering dopamine releases, and recommendation algorithms that learn exactly which content will keep you engaged longest, not which will benefit you most. These aren't accidental design choices. They're carefully engineered behavioral mechanisms derived from decades of psychological research. If you wanted to run a behavioral experiment on 100 college students today, you'd face rigorous ethical scrutiny. You'd need approval from an institutional review board. You'd require informed consent from every participant. You'd need to explain potential risks, have safety protocols, and provide options to withdraw from the study. Your methods and goals would be transparent, and independent oversight would be mandatory. None of these safeguards exist for the billions participating in our digital experiment. If this were a university psychology experiment, it would never get past the ethics board. But slap a terms of service agreement on it that nobody reads, all 33,000 words of it for the average platform, and suddenly you can experiment on billions. The absence of oversight is particularly troubling because unlike traditional experiments with clear research goals, these digital platforms are driven primarily by commercial imperatives. The experimental design prioritizes metrics like time spent, engagement rate, and advertising revenue, not user well-being or social cohesion. Multiple observers track this unfolding experiment with different goals. Platform companies observe users to maximize profit. Governments increasingly monitor these spaces for control and security. Academic researchers struggle with limited access to study impacts. And users, most remain largely unaware they're subjects in an experiment at all. The asymmetry of information and power is stark. Platform designers understand the psychological levers they're pulling, while users experience the effects without understanding the mechanisms. At the heart of these digital experiments are the algorithms, complex systems of code that determine what content you see and when you see it. These algorithms function essentially as experimental variables, continuously testing and reinforcing specific behaviors. Each interaction is logged, analyzed, and fed back into the system to refine its understanding of what keeps you engaged. It's worth noting that engagement, in this context, doesn't mean enjoyment or fulfillment, it simply means attention. And in the attention economy, your focus is the product being sold. These algorithms have discovered something troubling: emotionally provocative content, particularly content that triggers outrage, fear, or tribal identity, generates significantly more engagement than neutral or positive content. A 2018 MIT study found that false information spread 6 times faster than factual content, largely because it typically provokes stronger emotional reactions. This creates a perverse incentive structure where the most extreme, divisive, or shocking content rises to the top, regardless of its accuracy or social value. These platforms aren't optimized for truth, connection, or well-being, they're optimized for time spent. And outrage, fear, and controversy are the most reliable ways to keep you scrolling. This optimization has real consequences. Research suggests exposure to algorithm-curated feeds increases polarization, decreases nuance in thinking, and amplifies tribal identity formations. The metrics driving the experiment, clicks, shares, time spent, may be leading us toward precisely the kind of social dysfunction observed in Universe 25, where aggressive behaviors and withdrawal become increasingly common. One of the most striking parallels between Universe 25 and our digital landscape involves withdrawal behaviors. In Calhoun's experiment, some mice, the beautiful ones, completely withdrew from social interaction, focusing obsessively on self-grooming while avoiding actual connection. In our digital universe, we're seeing something disturbingly similar. Recent studies show 11% of adolescents globally exhibit problematic social media usage patterns that include withdrawal from real-world interactions while maintaining extensive online presence. Consider the rise of digital withdrawal phenomena, individuals who meticulously curate online personas while struggling with face-to-face interactions. They may have thousands of followers but few close friends. They may spend hours perfecting selfies but feel intense anxiety about unfiltered social encounters. The parallel to Calhoun's beautiful ones is uncanny, substituting digital grooming for physical grooming, yet similarly disconnected from authentic social engagement. The social consequences of this withdrawal are becoming increasingly evident. Researchers at Stanford University found that heavy social media users demonstrate measurably decreased empathy in face-to-face interactions. Other studies show correlations between platform usage patterns and diminished ability to read social cues or engage in sustained in-person conversation. We've essentially created digital versions of calhounds, beautiful ones. People who obsessively groom their online personas while withdrawing from real social interaction and losing the skills needed for genuine connection. Another crucial aspect of our digital experiment involves unprecedented information abundance. The average person today consumes more information in a day than someone in the 1400s would encounter in their lifetime. We're flooded with content, opinions, and stimuli at a scale unprecedented in human history. But just as the mice in Universe 25 couldn't properly function despite abundant resources, this information overload may be overwhelming our cognitive capacities rather than enhancing them. This abundance has led to what researchers call reality fragmentation, where user groups exist in fundamentally different perceived realities. Algorithmic curation creates filter bubbles where users primarily encounter viewpoints aligning with existing beliefs. Over time, these bubbles harden into information silos that make cross-group communication increasingly difficult. We're no longer just disagreeing about opinions, we're disagreeing about basic facts. When algorithms curate different realities for different people, consensus becomes nearly impossible. The impact of this information overload extends beyond politics to our fundamental relationship with knowledge itself. Studies show heavy social media users increasingly prefer simplified, emotionally resonant content over nuanced analysis. Attention spans fragment as platforms condition users for constant novelty. Critical thinking skills decline when algorithms pre-filter information. The mice in Universe 25 lost their natural social behaviors in an unnatural environment. Similarly, our evolved cognitive processes for evaluating information may be breaking down in an environment of algorithmic abundance, for which our brains simply weren't designed. In Universe 25, as social structures broke down, aggressive behaviors skyrocketed. Males fought more frequently, social hierarchies became unstable, and normal cooperative behaviors disappeared. Our digital platforms show disturbing parallels. Online disinhibition, the tendency to act more aggressively or impulsively online than in person, has become so common we've normalized it. Behind screens, empathy decreases, hostility increases, and behaviors emerge that would be unthinkable in face-to-face interactions. This digital aggression manifests in various forms: casual cruelty in comment sections, coordinated harassment campaigns, extreme polarization of discourse, and dehumanization of those with opposing viewpoints. Studies from NYU's Social Media and Political Participation Lab found that moral outrage expression is 2.7 times more common in online political discussions than in-person ones. Online, we treat others as NPCs, non-player characters, in our personal game. It's easier to be cruel when you forget there's a human being behind that username. Platform architecture often rewards rather than discourages these aggressive behaviors. Outrage spreads faster than nuance. Attacks generate more engagement than agreement. Inflammatory comments receive more responses than measured ones. These incentive structures shape behavior over time, potentially creating a self-reinforcing cycle of hostility. As in Universe 25, we may be witnessing how environmental conditions, in this case, algorithmic incentives, can transform naturally social creatures into something markedly different, with aggression replacing cooperation as the dominant mode of interaction. Perhaps the most troubling aspect of our digital social experiment is the question of consent. In traditional research, informed consent requires that participants understand what they're agreeing to, including potential risks and benefits. Yet most platform users have little awareness of how their behavior is being shaped, tested, and potentially altered. The terms of service agreements that ostensibly provide consent are notoriously unread. Studies show less than 1% of users actually review them before clicking agree. Even if users did read these agreements, They often lack the specialized knowledge to understand the implications. Most wouldn't recognize terms like engagement optimization, variable reward schedules, or algorithmic curation, let alone comprehend how these techniques might affect their behavior over time. The asymmetry of information is staggering. Platform designers deeply understand behavioral psychology and apply it systematically, while users remain largely unaware of the mechanisms influencing them daily. This experiment also lacks clear boundaries or exit options. Unlike traditional research, where participants can withdraw at any time without penalty, digital platforms have become increasingly integrated into essential aspects of modern life, from professional networking to accessing basic services. The social cost of non-participation grows steadily higher. When platforms become default communication channels for work, education, and civic engagement, opting out becomes less viable. The experiment expands continuously, with few opportunities for subjects to provide feedback on the experimental conditions themselves. The parallels between Universe 25 and our digital landscape are striking but not deterministic. Unlike Calhoun's mice, humans possess the awareness and agency to recognize and reshape the environments influencing them. By understanding digital platforms as experimental environments with specific parameters and incentive structures, we can approach them more consciously, recognizing when algorithms are reinforcing destructive behaviors, or when engagement mechanics are depleting rather than enriching our social connections. The most concerning aspects of this unintended experiment are its commercial motivations and lack of ethical oversight. Platform design prioritizes metrics like time spent and engagement over user well-being or social cohesion. No independent review boards evaluate potential harms, transparency remains limited, and commercial goals drive experimental design rather than scientific or ethical considerations. Addressing these structural issues requires looking beyond individual usage patterns to the systems and incentives shaping our digital environments. As we navigate this unprecedented social experiment, critical questions emerge. How aware are you of how these platforms might be shaping your behavior? When was the last time you questioned the recommended for you content or considered why certain posts appeared in your feed? What behaviors are being reinforced by your digital environment, and are they aligned with your actual values and goals? Unlike Calhoun's mice, we have the capacity to observe the experiment we're in and potentially alter its parameters, but only if we first acknowledge that the experiment is happening. In our next episode, we'll peek behind the curtain at the algorithmic architects designing our digital environments and the surprising ways they've learned to pull our psychological strings. We'll explore the specific mechanisms platforms use to shape behavior, from variable reward schedules to engagement optimization techniques, and examine the surprising confessions of former tech insiders who now refuse to use the very products they helped create. Thank you for joining this exploration of our unintended digital experiment. Until next time, remember, the first step in navigating any maze is recognizing you're in one.